When browsing different forum posts and talking to the community, I keep coming upon one of the same questions I get asked over and over again. How do I choose what support to pick? This is definitely a derivative of the larger question about how do I choose what character to pick, but for now let's specifically talk about supports. There are a number of many factors to decide what support you should pick for every situation. Map, game mode, character power level, and your personal preference and skill. There's so much to think about that I know it's incredibly easy to be completely lost when deciding what support to pick for each and every situation. So that being said, let's break down exactly what support you should pick for every given situation so that you can learn exactly what support to play for the highest amount of impact in each and every one of your games. All that being said, let's just jump right into it, shall we? Now, the first thing that we need to talk about is a support's goal. Now, the two things that a support should be trying to do in each and every game is enabling the team by constantly healing them up, creating that sustain, a term that I'll get to explaining in a little bit, and secondly, amplifying impact. Every single person on your team has a certain amount of impact that they bring to the table, a certain amount of impact that you as a support can amplify. You can only create impactful plays by yourself, but you can actually amplify the impact of players on your team. Think about something like damage boosting a McCree. That McCree has to hit far less shots on a Pharah in order to actually combat that Pharah. That's amplifying his overall DPS and amplifying his impact. Now let's pivot to something like a Lucio, who could speed boost his team. You're amplifying the impact of every single member on your team because you're amplifying their movement, making it so they get to the places they want to get to that much faster. They get to execute their game plan that much quicker, and that amplifies the overall impact for your team. So as a support, you want to be able to do both of these two things to the maximum effectiveness, while at the same time play a support that doesn't get shut down, doesn't get punished, and can help amplify your team to that maximum impact at the exact same time. So here's the first thing that you need to think about. What team composition are you playing? What's that team composition strengths and weaknesses, and who needs what heals? So let's first think about something like a dive. In a dive composition, you're going to have many characters that are hyper mobile. Think of things like Tracer, Genji, Wrecking Ball, Winston. In this composition, many of your allies are going to be pushing the enemy, diving together, but also engaging in duels from across the map. Because of this, you need to be playing healers that can amplify this strategy. Now, there are characters that can do this far better than others. Think about something like a Zenyatta. While Zenyatta can't go with his team, he can discord targets and easily heal targets from across the map without the necessary mechanical skill to hit his shots. Ana can do a similar thing, but you need to be real with yourself. Can you hit shots on your Genji or on your Tracer? If you can't do these things and your other healer is something like a Moira, can you even actually adequately sustain your team? Can you enable them? Can you amplify their impact in the way that you want to as a support? Speaking of Moira, Moira would be a perfect example of a character that wouldn't work very well with this composition. She needs to be in the fight in order to heal, and she doesn't want to have to use her Fade in order to actually heal her team. She wants to be able to save her Fade for when she gets dove herself. She doesn't have long range healing or the ability to constantly stay mobile and with her team. Now we can talk about a completely different composition altogether. Think about something like a Ryan and a Zarya. What a Ryan and Zarya want to do is they want to engage the enemy team, push forward, and create that constant pressure. Something like a Lucio could definitely amplify that impact. Can help speed boost his team in, can help them get into the fight that much quicker, and he can help execute their game plan that much more consistently. This is why understanding what your team composition strengths and weaknesses are, and ultimately what is your team composition trying to execute, what is their game plan, and what is the best support to enable that game plan, can be a way that you pick the best support for each and every situation. Now, another thing you really need to think about is what your other support. You can really talk to your other support, but there will be many times where they'll simply just play their best hero. If you're a flexible support player, you can play something that fills the gaps. If they're playing a character that has low overall heals, think something like a Zen, a Brig, a Mercy, a Lucio, then unless you're playing a composition that requires very low amount of heals that's extremely self-sufficient, you most likely need to be playing a character that provides much more sustainable heals. Think something like a Baptiste, an Ana, or a Moira. These characters provide burst heals, because a problem that you'll run into often if you play characters that don't provide that much overall healing is that unless you take the fights extremely quickly, your team will run out of that sustain. A lot of your tanks will be at half HP, and even if you put all your armor packs onto them, even if you amp up heals on Lucio or you full pocket them on Mercy, you can't heal them enough or burst them up fast enough in order to sustain them in the fight and over time your forces will get dwindled down, and that sustain will dwindle in a way that you can't have any long team fights. That's something you really need to think about. Is your team going to be brawling for long periods of time? If you're something like a dive and you're trying to end the fights quicker, you can get away with playing less heals. Or if you're playing a composition like Ryan Zara, you need to understand that if you are in a scenario where you don't have that much overall healing, you need to take the fights extremely fast, or else you're not going to be able to sustain yourself. These are things you need to understand, where you need to, one, either fundamentally change the play style of the composition you're playing, or two, play a different support altogether, one that can actually do your job at sustaining your team. Now, once you figured out what support to play in every situation, you want to make sure you're the best at that support out of anyone around your rank. The best way to get a jump start on your competition is coming and checking out GameLeap.com. I'm going to keep this short and sweet, so if you want to know more, please wait until the end of the video, but for now, hope you enjoy. Now, something else you need to keep in mind when picking the best support for each scenario is what map. Does the map have high ground? Where is the best places for positioning? And what character are you that can utilize this? Think of something like Nubani. This is one of the new maps in the new map pool for this season. Nubani is very polarizing, particularly on attack, because of the high ground advantage, just how dominating the high ground is. If you're a support, let's say you're something like Brig, it's going to be very hard for you to find value on something like Nubani. You have to get into the team in order to actually do damage. If you're playing on the point and the enemy team is trying to play on the high ground, you're not going to be able to trigger your Inspire that consistently. You're not going to be able to brawl the enemy, stun the enemy. You're not going to be able to actually put in that much impact, and you're going to die before you have any sustainable value added to the team fight. Now, characters that work really well are something like Ana, especially if you're playing on defense. You could be playing that high ground in a safe position. Sure, they can dive you, but you could be effective from any range. You can get peeled really easily. These are characters that can contribute value from the high ground to any place around the high ground and even on the point as well. Now, something like Baptiste is even better than something like Ana because he has the ability to take the high ground instantly because of his Exa boots. This allows him to really abuse being able to change positioning on a dime. He can drop down to the low ground, Exa boots up to the high ground, drop down to the low ground. There's very few characters in the entire game that can move positioning that fast, so he can abuse that. If he ever gets dove on the high ground, he can instantly drop to the low ground, go back to the high ground, go back to the low ground. It means that a monkey can't easily dive him, a monkey can't easily chase him. No one can burst him hard enough, and with all of his utility, he can really utilize the high ground to this maximum effectiveness. Even if he's playing attack with a dive composition, he can actually go up to the high ground, heal his divers from the enemy's high ground, throw Immortality Field in, contribute to the team that way. There's a lot of things that he can utilize. And lastly, when talking about what map you need to think about, is there any specific things that your characters can utilize to make it that much stronger? You can think about playing a Mercy on a Pharah Mercy map. Maybe the map is really good for Pharah, so you want to play a Mercy because they both benefit from each other in a mutually symbiotic relationship. Now, you could transition this to something like a Lucio. There are tons of maps where getting boops are really high impact. There's maps with rollouts. Think of maps like all the maps on Li Zhang or Ilios. There are a lot of different maps that have really strong boop potentials. And boop plays might seem like a joke to some people, but honestly, they could be a way to get consistent impact. I know I said impact a lot in this video, but that could be a way to get consistent value in your games, and it can be something that you could do to mess up an enemy strategy. They're playing Hog, they're playing Orisa, they're playing any of these characters that are stagnant. You can really punish them with these boot plays and bring in value from the support position that other characters might not be able to. Now, really quickly, I want to transition to the strengths and weaknesses of each support. There are a lot of strengths and weaknesses that each and every support will have, and each and every support comes with certain strengths and weaknesses. This can be understood only by those who play these characters. You utilize these strengths and weaknesses and your individual mechanical skill as well. How good you are on these heroes can be definitely helpful. I know that time and time again in many of your games, people think that supports should just be these flex gods that can play every single support, which is kind of really strange because it's not expected of DPS players. I guess it's because there's so many different DPSs, but you don't necessarily have to play every single support. You want to have a bag of supports to pull from, but at the same time, understand just how strong you are at each support and understand when you could use something strengths to your advantage. Maybe you think a strength of Ana is that she can anti-nade targets. The enemy has a Hog, you could play the high ground, you know that you can get value, so you want to play that character because of her strengths, but then also understand that Ana's weak because she doesn't have mobility. If you can't hit your sleep dart, if you miss your sleep dart, the enemy Doom is going to eat you alive. Understanding what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. Maybe you're playing Ana, the enemy has a Doom, and both your DPS are like Trace or Genji, and your tanks are like a flanking Hog and a Hammond. well, you're not going to get any peel. You're just going to get dove. You're just going to get killed. If you play Ana, you need to understand that unless you can consistently hit your sleep darts, you're not going to be able to stay alive against a diving Doom. In this way, swapping to a character that can stay alive would be far better than playing the best character for each and every situation. That's what I'm saying, is understanding the strengths and weaknesses of each support and just what your team is doing and just what they're actually doing to support you can be the best way to try to pick the support for each and every situation. And look, I get it. Many times you're playing support and your team is letting you down. They're not doing anything with the amount of support you're bringing to the table. They're not helping you stay alive. They're not helping peel for you. But the fact of the matter is, in ranked, it's honestly a mixed bag, and more often than not, they're not gonna fit your expectations each and every game. What you need to do if you want to climb is be adaptable, and this is particularly important for the support category. You have to make it your mission to do whatever you can to not get killed over and over again, to not get shut down. DPS players are going to want to hunt you down in each and every game you play, and it's your job to make it as hard as possible. And that means grinding your mechanics to make it that much more difficult, and also not being afraid to swap off when you're not getting the support you need, because ultimately it's your job to stay alive, and you need to try to make it as hard as possible for enemy DPS to punish you again and again. And to supplement this, sometimes actually just a playstyle change can sometimes be better than changing your character altogether. A lot of times it's actually possible to just change up your playstyle in a way that it's harder for you to get punished rather than changing up your whole character. This means maybe not wasting your nade trying to be aggressive when you know that you're going to get dove, or not trying to sleep dart something that's across the map unless they're really trying to push you because the Doomfist is waiting for you to waste your sleep dart. Understanding when you can change up your playstyle or just simply hold back abilities in order to punish a specific strategy that the enemy is trying to do over and over again can be one of the best ways to adapt to the enemy. This is all about adaptation. You can adapt based on your playstyle, your positioning, or change your character up altogether, but the fact of the matter is, this goes back to the final point that I need to make when trying to pick the best support for every situation. Pick the support that allows you to stay alive. Staying alive on support is more important than everything else. Like I said, every character in the game is going to want to come and hunt you down because you're like the MVP, the president, the most valuable player on the team. If you're dead, most of the time it's going to be impossible for your team to win the team fight. That means as such, if you can try to do your job to the best effectiveness, that's great. Doing all the things I talked about, playing the thing that's strongest and enabling your strategy, playing the thing that works the best with your team. But if you can't stay alive, none of this other stuff matters. Sure, you can communicate with your team, talk with your team, engage in comms, try to encourage them to switch to things that can help you stay alive. If you know that if you stay alive, you can get good impact. But at the end of the day, it's okay to swap to something untraditional or something that doesn't enable your team as long as it keeps you alive. Staying alive is the most valuable thing that you can do as a support, and making sure you play a character that doesn't die over and over again can be the best way to win more games. And I know this seems incredibly obvious, but I cannot tell you how many times I've played Doomfist, Tracer against a Zenyatta or an Ana, stubbornly never ever switching, and I'm sure they're terribly mad at their off tank, they're terribly mad at their hog, they're terribly mad at their DPS, and it's okay to be mad at them. Maybe they're not doing their job, but if you're playing Zenyatta into a Doomfist that's farming you life after life after life, and you're not getting changes from your team, but you're not changing yourself, you're just as much as fault as they are, and you are just as responsible for winning that game as the rest of the members on your team. Also, many of you might be thinking I'm being overly hard on supports, but I love playing supports. Support is one of my most played roles, and when I climbed support all the way to GM, it was definitely quite a bit more difficult for me personally than DPS or tank. But that being said, I still find a way to make it work, doing a lot of things I talk about in this guide. I played a number of different healers, but I really tried and evaluated my impact on each and every game I played, and I wasn't afraid to switch up my playstyle, switch up my positioning, or overall switch up my character in order to guarantee that I stayed alive, was never farmed by an enemy, and I had impact in each and every game, because consistency is the key, and over the long term you will climb if you can maintain that consistent level of impact in each and every game you play, no matter what the circumstance. Now, if you want to learn all the tips and tricks to help you hard carry even the worst of teammates, then you definitely want to come check out GameLeap.com. We have in-depth guides handcrafted by Grandmaster players that have lived through it. They have hard struggled through all the ranks that you have been to, and they know exactly just how bad some of your teammates are and what it takes in order to hard carry them, and we can help you do that in each and every game you play. So definitely do yourself a favor and come check us out in the links here, and you won't regret it. That being said, if you have any questions, agree, disagree, please leave them in the comments down below. I would love to know, as well as any more guides like this. I want to break down more things about, maybe you want to see a video about the best tanks for each situation or the best DPS. I would love to make these guides, or if you want to see more support content, smash that like button and let me know in the comments down below. This is the only way that I know that you love support content and you want to see more of it. DPS content is our most popular by far, but if you want to see more support content, I will not hesitate to make it. Anyways, that's all I have for you today. I'm Coach Mills, and until next time.